The first thing I did after being reborn as a pig was devour everything in sight. I went on a frenzy, inhaling 125 kilos of feed. I ate until I became the most robust beast in the entire pen. The other pigs called me every name in the book. They mocked my obsession, but they didn't understand the truth. There are only two endings for a pig as big as me: the slaughterhouse, or becoming a breeder. To me, both options were worse than death. What they didn't know was that I'd awakened the devouring evolution system. I just needed to eat to become the strongest. I felt myself growing stronger with every bite. The feed leveled me up slowly, but it was a guaranteed path. Nobody would ever suspect a pig of leveling up in secret. I checked my status constantly. My limit as a domestic pig was 500 kilos. Once I hit that weight, I could unlock my evolution and gain a new form. My plan was perfect: eat in peace until I hit 500 kilos. Then, I'd undergo a spectacular metamorphosis. But two humans were about to ruin everything. The pen didn't collapse completely. "Dad, please don't kill Xiaoji, he's a good pig." A little girl with pigtails was tugging on the arm of a burly man. Her eyes were red like a little rabbit's as she glanced at me. She looked at me with such tenderness, but her dad just laughed. "Honey, doesn't that braised pork from lunch smell delicious?" It did smell good, actually. "Fine, I won't kill him yet," he sighed. "But the slaughterhouse already placed the order. We'll sell him right after the new year." The moment I heard those words, the feed I was chewing lost all its flavor. Luckily, I still had a few months until the new year. I had to trigger my evolution before then. I was certain I could escape this farm. I would find my freedom. For the next 2 months, I surrendered myself to a feeding frenzy. I ate until my jaws ached. Golden corn, red sweet potatoes, pumpkins, it didn't matter. Anything edible went straight into my mouth. The result wasn't what I expected. I took a secret peek at my status panel. Weight, 200 kilos. Constitution, 5. Strength, 10. The problem was the food. These low-energy rustic grains were making my levels climb slower than a snail. Even though I was already the king of the pen and the other pigs saw me as a god, dreaming of facing humans with this pathetic strength was a total delusion. Still, as my body grew, my senses became incredibly sharp. Now, even the sound of the television inside the house came through with total clarity. The news anchor was reporting. Global temperatures continue to rise. Antarctic ice is melting rapidly, and sea levels are climbing. A national fleet has discovered traces of a mysterious creature under the ice. Our station will continue to follow this story closely. Every word reached my ears. As a pig who had actually gone to university in my past life, I saw the perfect path forward. I knew exactly what those reports meant. Over the next few days, the news about the economy and taxes grew worse, but the reports on the climate became even more alarming. First, European countries were the hardest hit in history. They began a frantic, massive military expansion. Then, authorities hinted at stockpiling supplies. An inexplicable sense of danger washed over me. It could be months or years away. I was lost in thought. That burly man returned, accompanied by several other guys. When he saw how robust I'd become, he grinned so hard the wrinkles around his eyes could have trapped flies. "Help me out, boys. Let's get this pig on the truck. When we're done, drinks are on me." "You got it." Several men surrounded me immediately. I fought back with every ounce of my strength, but they ended up grabbing me by the tail. They dragged me brutally out of my pen. When I saw that massive truck with the iron cage and heard the door slam shut, a cold shiver ran through my soul. If it had been a normal truck, I would have tried to flip it right then and there to make my escape. But that kind of iron cage destroyed any hope of getting away. But as they threw me inside, I realized it wasn't locked with a padlock, just a simple sliding bolt. That was my final spark of hope to save my life. I gritted my teeth and endured the wait until the truck hit the highway. Then I snuck my tongue out, slowly nudging that bolt bit by bit. Just as I was about to open it, I froze. I scanned my surroundings desperately for a place with mountains and thick forests. I needed to lose the humans. The more isolated, the better for leveling up in secret. I waited for nearly an hour. Finally, the perfect landscape appeared. A mountain range overflowing with trees. A green paradise. It looked infinite. If I could just lose myself in this virgin forest, not even 100 men would ever find me. Without a second thought, I gave the bolt one final shove with my tongue. I kicked off with my back legs and leaped straight out. I dove from the speeding truck and hit the ground hard. I rolled down the embankment until I splashed into a river. Thanks to my enhanced constitution, I only injured my back legs. I couldn't stop for a second, fearing they'd come after me. Ignoring the pain, I crawled out of the water and vanished into the trees. I needed to find a shelter where I could heal in peace. But then, I spotted something dark and strange. A plant at the foot of a massive tree caught my eye. It was ugly, but it had vibrant green leaves and thick, prominent roots. It looked like a Hishowu root, and with my legs mangled, eating it would surely heal me instantly. But just as I was about to open my mouth, a massive centipede, over half a meter long, suddenly lunged from behind the trunk. Its body was as thick as a human arm. The dark, segmented creature writhed, lashing out directly at me. I already weighed nearly 250 kilograms. Still, if this thing bit me, I'd be in serious trouble. I approached it slowly. I waited until I was at the perfect distance and pounced, using my entire body weight to crush the creature, until it was nothing but a deformed mass. Looking at that mangled pulp on the ground, I felt a moment of hesitation. But a centipede that size wasn't normal. Swallowing it would make my strength explode. I opened my jaws, inhaled sharply, and devoured the giant insect in a single gulp. Ding. Species, domestic pig. Weight, 240 kilograms. Constitution, strength. First time devouring an animal. Awakening skill, art of gluttony. This allows me to vacuum up food from a distance, drastically increasing efficiency. No way, this skill feels like it was tailor-made for me. I asked the system anxiously, can evolution awaken other things? Host, with every evolution, you will awaken a new magical art. Evolving 5 times will awaken a divine power. My heart leaped with joy. I decided to test my new skill, aimed at the Hishowu root, and inhaled. The root flew toward me, shrinking in midair until I swallowed it whole. A tingling sensation shot through my back legs, and my wounds healed instantly. My strength and constitution both increased by 2 points. I was becoming something far beyond a normal pig. My weight finally surpassed 250 kilograms. Everything was going perfectly. This forest was my true promised land. But I soon realized a vast, virgin forest hides countless dangers. Wild beasts. With my current strength, I could bully small animals, but against a bear or a tiger, I wouldn't even be a snack. If I reached my first evolution, maybe no one in this forest could stop me, so I had to be careful. I needed to grow in the shadows, so I left my family and headed toward the cliffs. I moved through the forest with stealth, searching for my next target. That's when I found a hidden rocky cave. Now that my sense of smell was sharper, I sniffed the air for danger. There were no traces of other beasts at the entrance. The place seemed abandoned, perhaps because it was so close to the road. Feeling safe for now, I crawled into the cave to fall into a deep sleep. At that same moment, on a distant sea, a dense fog rolled in. A fleet of more than 10 battleships was desperately retreating. The cannons roared. The massive blasts made the heavens and earth tremble, as if something terrifying was hiding in that mist. Full speed ahead. Retreat. The engines screamed at maximum power. Inside the ship's command center, on the flagship's main screen, the silhouette of a creature appeared. It emitted a terrifying crimson glow, caught simultaneously by radar and infrared sensors. The middle-aged officer stood there, pale as a ghost. The young officer beside him spoke with a trembling voice. "Commander, what the hell is that thing? The thermal energy it radiates is more devastating than our entire fleet combined. It doesn't matter what it is. Now we can only pray our losses are minimal. Transmit the order. Declare these waters a forbidden zone. This is top secret." A few days later, deep in the Darling Virgin Forest, I was still eating and sleeping in a peaceful cycle. I was completely unaware that the danger I had sensed was silently beginning. I checked my stats. I already weighed 300 kilos, but the common food around me made my leveling slower and slower. With no other choice, I had to venture deeper into the forest. I hadn't walked far when I spotted a river. Jackpot. I tried opening my maw and inhaling toward a school of fish in the water. The fish went flying directly into my mouth. Strength +1. Eating fish gave me strength. I lay down on the riverbank. Every time the fish got close, I took a powerful breath and swallowed them whole. Snap. Another fish went straight into my mouth. As I devoured what felt like $1 million worth of fish, my white body began to darken into a blackish-brown tone, and from my jaw, a pair of sharp tusks sprouted. Ding. Species, wild boar. Weight, 325 kilos. Constitution, 30. Strength, 50. After evolving into a wild boar, my body reached nearly 3 meters in length. Since small fish gave me no more gains, I moved deeper into the forest. Soon, I heard the howling of wolves. My instinct told me to turn and run, but then I felt the power pulsing through my veins, and I decided to sneak closer for a look. As I approached, I saw a pack of wolves cornering 2 black bears. Logically, wolves were no match for a bear, but the larger bear was protecting a small cub. To guard its offspring, the great bear didn't dare leave even a single opening. Watching them fight, I thought about waiting for both sides to annihilate each other so I could take advantage. But seeing that cub trembling in panic, my heart softened with compassion. I threw my massive body forward, charging at full speed, taking off like a bolt of lightning. The impact was terrifying. Using my specialized boar charge technique, I sent 3 wolves flying with a single hit. The great black bear seized the moment, crushing another wolf with its paw. The alpha wolf stared me down and let out a long, piercing howl toward the sky. I thought they'd turn on me, but the pack retreated into the shadows. The black bear gave me a long, lingering look before leading its cub back into the thicket of the forest. I looked at the wolf carcasses on the ground and opened my jaws. New species, iron pig. Weight, 350 kilos. Constitution, strength, 85. Just as I expected, large beasts gave me way more points. I'm nearly at 500 kilos already. I kept wandering deeper into the woods until a dark object caught my eye. It sat silently beneath the dry leaves. A beast trap. Setting traps this deep in the forest wasn't the work of honest hunters. These were poachers. As I stood there, a deafening roar of a tiger echoed ahead. A Dombi tiger, the true king of the jungle. It seemed the poachers had already cornered the massive cat. I hesitated, but I decided to approach in silence, ready to bolt if things got ugly. I slowed my pace. Despite my 350 kilos, I moved through the dense brush without making a sound. As I neared the area, the battle was already over. The air felt tainted, and I could sense the presence of those players. They were right in front of me, so I scanned the surroundings. I hid among the bushes and kept stalking them. In a clearing, a campfire burned, surrounded by 5 people. They were men, and they looked like they were settling in. "Thanks for the meal," one of them shouted. They laughed around the fire. My sharpened senses allowed me to hear their conversation with perfect clarity. They turned out to be Japanese poachers. It seemed the Dombi tiger had indeed fallen into their traps. I saw its tail poking out of a black bag lying next to them. My heart began to race with desperation. I needed to secure my future. I waited for the moment to strike, knowing that devouring that tiger would break the 500-kilo barrier and trigger my evolution. Deep night soon fell, swallowing the forest in darkness. One man stood guard while the others crawled into their tents, so I began to slide forward. I crept toward the camp, and when I was only 100 meters away, I stopped hiding and charged with pure fury. The guard barely raised his weapon before I was already on top of him. A single lunge sent him flying through the air. The others rushed out of their tents at the noise, but I slammed into them with a series of vicious, jagged strikes. Using my fangs, I made sure to neutralize every single one of them. Once I confirmed the danger was gone, I moved in immediately. I headed straight for those mysterious black bags. The first bag contained the Dombi tiger. It was beautiful, but lifeless. The second bag held an immense grizzly bear. When I opened the third, I discovered 2 small tiger cubs that were still breathing. They were unconscious and sedated, so I kept searching for what I craved most, a phone or a device, to connect to the outside world and monitor the global situation. On the ground, next to the 3 enormous black bags, lay the bodies of the men I had just broken. I started rummaging through the poachers' backpacks. I tore them open one by one. The treasures that spilled out were more than I expected, including a notebook detailing their dark crimes over the last few years. Most of it was information about the terrain, including the virgin zones of this massive daling forest. I kept digging through another bag. I found a smartphone, a fully charged portable battery, and a small hand crank generator. It was like finding water in the desert, and my heart raced with pure joy. Just then, the 2 cubs woke up and huddled together near their mother. When they saw me, they didn't run. They stood their ground in front of the Dombi tiger's body, baring their tiny fangs at me. Looking at their fragile frames, I figured their small bodies wouldn't provide much energy anyway. I decided to eat the grizzly bear first to clear my head. I wanted to see if I could trigger an evolution immediately, so I opened my jaws and swallowed the giant bear. In a single bite. Species, wild boar. Weight, 475 kilos. Constitution, 100. Strength, 100. Agility, 120. I was only 25 kilos away from my long-awaited evolution. I locked my gaze on the 2 cubs, who were trembling with fear. They were terrified, their tiny bodies trembling harder by the second. In the end, I couldn't bring myself to hurt them. Instead, I shifted my gaze to the Dombi tiger lying behind them. I took a step forward, closing the distance between us. The movement made them shake violently, but they still stood their ground to the death. One of them let out a low growl, trying to warn me off. But as I resisted, the other suddenly spun around and bolted out of sight. I didn't chase after it, I just kept moving forward. I reached for the Dombi tiger, but before I could take another step, the cub that had just fled came charging back. At full speed, it was carrying something dark, a dark brown bag clutched tightly between its teeth as it ran toward me. It dropped the bag in front of me with a dull thud. Then, it scurried back to its sibling's side. From the bag, right next to the Dombi tiger's chest, a pile of medicinal herbs rolled out onto the ground. Ginseng and Husho Wu. I opened my mouth and swallowed them all instantly. The herbs on the ground transformed into a flowing stream of water. A surge of pure energy hit me, and I devoured it in a single gulp. Ding! My weight surpassed 1,000 pounds as my body began to transform before my eyes. I had evolved into a completely new species, the black armored boar. New skill awakened, black armor. It can cover my entire body, granting me total immunity to physical damage. After processing the new information, I turned back to the 2 cubs. After everything that happened, I realized something important. These 2 little guys weren't just full of spiritual energy, they were incredibly intelligent, and they were fiercely loyal to their own. So, I decided to take them in. I didn't devour the fallen Dombi tiger. Instead, I dug a deep hole in the earth, and I buried him. This one gesture changed everything. The hostility the cubs felt toward me vanished almost instantly. I let out a soft, low grunt to get their attention. I tossed a backpack in front of them, showing them it was empty. I gestured for them to take turns carrying it if they got tired. These little ones are going to be great companions. They understood me perfectly. Docilely, they picked up the backpack and followed me out of the camp. As I headed deeper into the forest, I checked my next evolution requirements. To my surprise, the next stage required an absurd 20,000 pounds. Suddenly, I remembered the notebook I found earlier. It contained the coordinates for several high-ranking agents. There were massive beasts marked all along this border. Guided by this living map, I began my hunt. I devoured everything in my path, consuming one colossal beast after another. My size increased at a terrifying rate, but hunting wasn't my only priority. I needed to stay updated on the news. The broadcast reported that ancient temples and mountains like Gutai and Longgu, along with Yuhua and Yindang, would begin accepting disciples today. They were looking for a massive influx of new students. A university degree was required, though they'd be flexible for those with talent. I didn't expect the media to publicize these sacred places so openly, let alone announce such a massive recruitment drive. Something felt different about this transparency. I immediately searched for more info and found a link to a shocking story. It was a bombshell from the Waxia Martial Arts Association. Today, they officially announced the tiers of martial cultivation. They defined the path of a true warrior. Cultivation means absorbing the spiritual energy of heaven and earth through sheer effort. They divided the path into 10 great realms. The goal was for the masses to join the ranks of martial artists and train diligently to reach the peak. My head spun. Since when did Waxia have an organization like this? They were laying everything bare. I looked up at the sky, realizing the great transformation was already here. And at this exact moment, I was still so far away from my second evolution. I had to move faster. I let out a call, and my 2 subordinates pushed south, tearing through the thicket. I stuck to my one golden rule: devour everything. In just a few days, my weight skyrocketed to 3,000 pounds. My strength and size multiplied. After swallowing a couple of unlucky deer, I stopped by a pond of crystal clear water. The pups didn't even wait for my signal before diving in. They splashed around happily while I ignored them. I laid down on the soft grass and drifted into a deep sleep. But that nap almost became my eternal rest. An urgent, guttural roar snapped me awake. A giant python was lunging at me. It had been hiding under the surface, over 40 feet of muscle and scales, half submerged and closing in. Its icy gaze locked onto me as I scrambled to my feet, heart pounding. I didn't hesitate for a second. I lunged forward immediately to strike. However, my fierce charge was easily blocked. The python moved like a blur, and the water's resistance killed my momentum and slowed me down drastically. But in the water, the snake was in its element. It wasn't hindered in the slightest. My attack failed miserably. Before I could even attempt another strike, I was brutally slammed into the water by the massive tail of that giant python. Seeing me go down, my pup let out a roar of pure fury. The snake turned its rage toward him, twisting its body to swim for the shore, but I bit its tail and hurled it onto the grass. It turned out that the moment I hit the water, my black armor skill had automatically triggered. The dark shell absorbed the impact. My crimson fur erupted in flames, and my stats doubled instantly. I launched my counterattack, and though the python coiled its body around me with crushing force, it couldn't budge me. It was completely helpless against my armor. I spent the next half hour frantically tearing into that black snake until it finally stopped moving. Only then did I settle down and act with total calm. I ripped a massive chunk of meat from its tail and tossed it over to the 2 little cubs. But just as I began to slowly savor the taste of the meat myself, I spotted a 4-meter-tall white wolf in the distance, staring intently at the little ones by my side. Sensing that unusual, predatory aura, I snapped my head around and met that icy gaze, a wild, solitary wolf. He was hundreds of meters away, and normally I wouldn't have reached him in time, but if he's looking for death by eyeing my subordinates, I have no choice but to send him to the next world. My entire body was instantly encased in jet-black spiritual armor, and the air around me began to boil. Just as the wolf sensed the danger, all he saw was a dark shadow charging toward him at a speed that defied imagination. In one blinding flash, that 4-meter wolf was sent flying hundreds of meters through the air, slamming violently into a tree. I shook my head as he hit the ground. I signaled the cubs to bring me the carcass, and they immediately ran to drag the wolf back to me. After devouring 2 massive beasts back to back, a scorching heat radiated through my veins as power surged within me. I felt my body growing larger and more imposing. System, check my stats. Species, black armored boar. Weight, 3,600 pounds. Strength, 600. Speed, 550. I was still a long way from reaching 20,000 points, so I decided to rest first and figure the rest out later. But while I was sleeping peacefully along the endless coastline, a bloody battle was raging behind the towering black walls of a restricted military zone. A middle-aged man wrapped in a heavy military coat stood staring out at the vastness of the sea, his eyes heavy with gravity as a soldier came rushing in. Report, a massive swarm of sea monsters detected in Sector 3, including 20 sharp tentacle beasts. Our coastal artillery is gone. Damn those vermin, the commander cursed. What's the casualty report? 50 regular soldiers fallen. Master Chun is critically injured, the soldier replied. And Lieutenant Liu has minor wounds. Shifan Jin managed to kill one of the sharp tentacle monsters with a single blow to the head. The commander nodded slowly. Understood. Maintain an unbreakable defense at all costs. The man let out a heavy, ragged sigh. His name was Tian Meng, the base commander, and ever since those monsters emerged years ago, the situation had only gotten worse. He knew they couldn't hide the truth much longer. Their only hope was to train a legion of experts. But while the Waxia bases fought those ruthless battles, I was in the thick of Daling, sleeping like a log. The 2 cubs were out cold too, though it was obvious our bodies had grown significantly larger than before. I was now 7 meters long and 3 meters tall, a literal shadow tank on the earth. I'd hunted countless giants in this forest, from a 3-meter scarlet ape to a massive brown bear. I even crossed paths with a 100-meter emerald wolf and a colossal snake that stretched nearly as far. The raw power those creatures possessed was incredibly tempting to me. I calculated that if I didn't use my ebony armor, defeating those beasts wouldn't have been an easy task at all. As for that black tiger the notebook called a sacred beast, it still hadn't shown its face. I had a gut feeling that tiger would be my ultimate opponent, but I won't dwell on that now. Today, we're treating ourselves to something extra, starting with that brown bear. I called my 2 adorable cubs, and we headed toward a mountain in the southern zone. That killer brown bear's den was hidden deep inside a cave. It didn't take long before a massive, gloomy cavern revealed itself before my eyes. The 2 little ones immediately hid behind my back, and they started letting out low, nervous growls. Suddenly, the thunderous sound of rolling rocks echoed from deep within the cave. A colossal brown bear emerged walking upright, radiating a ruthless, bestial aura. I stared in shock. What the hell had this guy eaten to grow to such a massive scale? Even though we were similar in size, he looked far more imposing standing on his hind legs. The bear lunged directly at me with a wild, unhinged roar. It was clear he recognized me. To be honest, we'd clashed once before. Only back then, I hadn't unleashed my full strength yet. This time, it was a true grudge match between enemies with blood boiling in hatred. This time, the massive bear went rolling across the dirt. But he didn't stay down for long. He twisted his heavy body midair, slamming his paws onto the ground to force himself back up. Even though my defensive armor was far superior to his hide, his giant claws still managed to rip right through my skin. I realized it wasn't smart to let this drag on. If I kept fighting like this, it would take all day just to finish him off. And there were still other giant beasts lurking in the woods. With a single thought, I let the ebony armor wrap slowly around my body. In that exact moment, a scorching heat wave flooded the air. As the armor fused, I felt my power double, making my defense absolutely absurd. It was terrifying. The brown bear locked eyes with me, and a flash of genuine panic betrayed his gaze. He tried to scramble backward, but my silhouette shifted instantly. I transformed into a blur of pure darkness. A massive explosion followed, making the earth tremble with a dull, heavy thud. The bear's lifeless body slid right off the cliffside, kicking up a massive cloud of dust as it slammed into the earth below. My 2 adorable little pups started jumping up and down, their eyes sparkling as they stared hungrily at the bear's giant paws. I signaled for them to eat later and prepared to head into the cavern. I had to make sure there wasn't another bear lurking inside before leading them in. The cave turned out to be much more spacious than I ever imagined. It was so big that I could prowl through the darkness with total freedom. As we moved deeper, I discovered a beautiful variety of wildflowers. Among them were strange, exotic fruits that gave off a soft, intoxicating aroma. I knew without a shadow of a doubt that these were exquisite treasures. That 7-meter-tall grizzly bear really was a king. He held the title of sovereign over this half of the forest, and he certainly had good taste when it came to choosing a home. When I reached the deepest corner of the cave, I noticed a small pool on the floor. Inside it sat a shimmering puddle of golden liquid, an immense spring of pure honey. Had that savage grizzly slaughtered a queen bee to get this? I had to wonder. After meticulously searching the rest of the lair, I let my 2 gluttons start drinking. They dove right into the honey. I made my way back toward the exit and looked up at the sky. I tore off one of the grizzly's massive claws to save for my little subordinates. Then, I began to devour the rest of the carcass like a madman. The bear's immense, searing energy flooded my body without stopping. I decided to head back to the cave to rest and recover. After taking a sweet gulp of honey, I fell into a deep, heavy slumber. While I slept, my body began to stretch and grow once again. I eventually reached 9 meters in length and 4 meters in height. Even in the vast lands of Nanyu, my presence was now one of a kind. But being big wasn't enough for me. I needed to find a rival to test my strength, hunting them down one by one. I planned to deal with that water python first, then corner every beast in my domain. I refused to believe I wouldn't find that black tiger eventually. I had avoided the python before because its kingdom lay deep underwater. But with my new, colossal figure, I knew I could crush it without effort. Before leaving, I decided to check my phone and scroll through the news. One headline in particular made my blood run cold. Beasts had invaded the nation of Jingtao, slaughtering everyone in their path. Refugees were fleeing in terror while the world watched in silence. The comments were filled with pure, uncontrollable rage and desperation. Is Jingtao really in ruins already? How did their coastal barrier collapse so fast? Someone posted a photo of a 9-meter lizard crushing a tank with its jaws. Hysteria broke out as the Waxia government realized they couldn't hide the war anymore. They finally started releasing information to the public bit by bit. Official reports and leaked notes flooded the internet. Experts filtered out the details, leaving everyone petrified with fear. Watching the panic, my curiosity got the better of me. I typed out a comment. That monster wouldn't survive a single hit from me. I knew I could crush it without breaking a sweat. A second later, a swarm of people started attacking me. Stop making up stories, one replied. My master is the leader of Fan Kunshin. Even his best strike couldn't kill that beast. You've lost your mind if you think you're stronger than him. I laughed and asked if his master would be embarrassed by his comments. He replied that his master doesn't use social media or even know who he is. I scrolled through more news and felt a sudden jolt of anxiety. Those lizards were already as strong as giant bears. 3 days passed in a blur of constant hunting. There was no room for laziness as I devoured everything in my path. System, show me my status. I need to improve. I've slaughtered almost every beast in this area, but I'm still not where I want to be. I'm still far from reaching 2,000 strength points and a truly imposing size. To make matters worse, the internet is obsessed with the rebirth of heaven and earth. Everyone is talking about the recovery of spiritual aura. I looked at the 2 tigers by my side and wondered if they understood any of this. They met my gaze with nothing but silence. I let out a soft, heavy sigh. If the secrets of this world are a mystery to me, these 2 are definitely lost. My body now towered at 11 meters tall, the true supreme king of Nanyu. Even that hateful scarlet-furred monkey wouldn't dare provoke me now. We're close to the coast, I thought. Let's see if we run into those giant lizards. I turned toward the horizon and led the 2 tigers toward the sea. The Nanyu forest meets the ocean right where the city gates stand. A military base sits there, though few monsters ever emerge from the river. This makes this specific barracks the safest of all 24 military bases. On a small man-made island nearby, a general stood staring at a radar screen. His expression was tense, his eyes fixed on a massive heat signature. The screen showed that the beast had finally started to move. It was the highest energy reading they had ever detected in the entire world. Nothing on dry land could compare to it. Even the tentacled lizards from the deep sea wouldn't dare get close. Commander, should we prepare the heavy artillery? An officer asked. Not yet. The mainland districts already have their eyes fixed on that creature. The general nodded with a face of steel, ordering the men to secure all weapons. While the entire military base held its collective breath, I was enjoying a leisurely stroll through the forest toward the coast. I caught a scent on the wind, the unmistakable stench of those tentacled lizards. 2 days later, my eyes lit up when I spotted a 9-meter lizard in the distance. Compared to my overwhelming mass, these creatures looked like mere garden skinks. The moment they saw me, they began to back away in pure terror. Did they really think I would just let them escape? With a look of pure contempt, I launched my massive body forward like an unstoppable force. I felt my power surging as the system prepared to update my progress. Cornered, the lizards bared their fangs and claws, ready for a fight to the death. But at the exact moment of impact, I sent them flying through the air. Their thick, scaly hides offered no protection against my strength. My silver tusks ripped through their flesh in a single, clean stroke. I left them with deep, bleeding gashes, giving them no room to recover. I didn't give those monsters a single second to breathe. I launched a savage charge to send both of them straight to hell. Every flash of that brutality was being watched. Back at the military base, the veteran general stared at the monitors. His eyes hid a deep stupor laced with cold terror. The lizards that had been his worst nightmare were being slaughtered like nothing. If this footage leaked to the Waxia network, it would cause a global earthquake. Just how big are those 2 lizards? The general muttered. And what level of power do they belong to? According to the radar echoes, both colossi were nearly 10 meters long. They were at the absolute peak of the bone-strengthening realm. To massacre beasts of that magnitude would require a 6th-grade spirit awakening expert. The gap between the 7th and 6th grades is a dark, endless abyss. Crossing into the 6th grade means touching the sacred threshold of the middle realms. Only the leaders of the most legendary sects breathe at those levels. The fall of Jingtao under the lizard's yoke had seemed written in stone. Common monsters already equal the human lower realms in strength. Against 10-meter giants, the city's anti-aircraft batteries were just a sigh in the wind. The general, his face hardening, turned to his officers. Have you felt the power of that damn boar? He asked. That beast hasn't even shown us its true power yet. An ocean of pure, terrifying energy boils in his veins. Is he an earthly god on the same level as the Lizard King? I dragged the remains of those lizards back to my cave and began my feast. The energy flowing into me was intoxicating. I felt an inexhaustible heat pulsing as my muscles and size slowly expanded. Drunk on power, I looked at my 2 followers and let out a sharp grunt. What they did out there was truly embarrassing. They have the blood of jungle kings, yet they let a miserable lizard make them tremble. If they had attacked together, that giant reptile wouldn't have stood a chance. The 2 tigers lowered their heads. They let out muffled whimpers, not daring to contradict me for a second. From this day forward, you will be known as Hu Ji and Hu Er. Both tigers nodded as if they truly understood my command. I intended to raise these 2 with a firm hand to make them my perfect weapons. The chaos of the new era is right around the corner. If I hunt a few more of those lizards on the beach, my evolution will be imminent. System, show me my status. Wild boar, 2,000 pounds, 1,100 power, absolute devouring. I'm just a few more lizard meals away from a perfect transformation. Meanwhile, back at the island's naval base, the atmosphere was heavy. The fear in the air was thick enough to touch. They had been eyewitnesses to the overwhelming force that I radiated from every fiber of my being. Sir, today that beast took down 4 tentacled lizards. One was nearly 10 meters long. The military high command has already set its sights on this imposing boar king, sealing my files as a top-tier national secret. If they could only convince this boar king to fight on their side, their revenge would be certain. Of course, we have to risk contacting him. To my eyes, this beast isn't like the others, especially since he took 2 tigers under his wing. He moves like a shadow, and if that wasn't enough, his only passion is slaughtering those tentacled lizards. We'll have to approach him before dawn. But not right now. This boar king and his 2 wild cubs hide a mystery that defies the gods themselves. The truth was, from my throne on the sand, I had already spotted their base in the distance. But they weren't worth a second of my time as I dragged my trophies back into the darkness. I called out, "Hu Ji, Hu Air, come witness our glory. Today you fought with honor, and at least you didn't run." After my words, I devoured the massive lizards in a single, greedy gulp. And just like that, the days vanished like a setting sun. My routine took me to the sea every day to hunt for new wonders. I searched for prey, but their silhouettes were becoming harder to find. I needed more. The tentacled lizards were growing scarce, but I was already touching the edge of my next evolution. I was on the verge of evolving, but today, I stood still. Scanning the network, my eyes caught a headline that shook the world's soul. Live report incoming. The broadcast cut to base number 20. It had fallen, completely wiped out by the lizards. Those tentacled monsters left nothing behind. Among the fallen lay the lifeless body of the leader of Huashan, Lucy. Beside her, rivers of blood from countless nameless heroes soaked the earth. Today, the world outside is a graveyard. Everything is burning. If they aren't dying in battle against nightmare beasts, their souls are being forged in the fires of brutal, desperate training. Compared to them, my days felt like a sun-drenched paradise. Ruling this seaside forest meant that dinner usually came looking for me. And so, in that sweet monotony, more days slipped away. The chaos of the world felt like a distant memory. As was my habit, I was patrolling the shore with my 2 loyal tigers. Suddenly, an abysmal, soul-tearing power erupted from the very bowels of the planet. Pure, chaotic energy spiraled into the sky. The divine rebirth of heaven and earth had begun. In an instant, the horizon was swallowed by the ground itself. A thick, gray mist rolled in from nowhere, and the very art of nature began to shift. The hunger sleeping in my veins woke up to unleash its fury, and my body savagely devoured infinite torrents of spiritual energy. I was already on the edge of evolution, but this baptism of divine light shattered my limits in the blink of an eye. Beside me, my 2 little tigers looked intoxicated by the power. I felt a surge of gratitude for this strength. I watched in silence. They were safe within my shadow. Meanwhile, the ancient magic began its work. It was molding and reshaping everything. Their fragile bodies were changing before my eyes. The world was shifting into a new era. Everything men have built in their lives was being reduced to the same dust. From the lands of Joaxia to the furthest reaches, the entire world was trembling. Everything fell into unison under this ultimate goal. It was a metamorphosis as cruel as it was beautiful. Deep within the black, unfathomable heart of the ocean, a titanic island lay resting. Spiritual energy swirled there like an end-of-the-world storm, while colossal shadows let out roars that made the heavens bleed. Their massive figures, submerged in that hurricane of pure power, were also mutating with time. With every heartbeat, the immense lizard guarding the city grew more terrifying. The northeast corner was simply majestic, with a divine glow bathing its unbreakable scales. Its gaze, a pit of scarlet flames, radiated that unmistakable aura. It was the sadistic cruelty of an absolute tyrant. There was no room for doubt. He was the peerless lizard king who had reduced the defenses of entire nations to ash. A gale of light and power lashed the world without mercy for a long time. 3 nights and 3 days, while power grids and the voices of humanity were cut off. They were buried in silence by the fury, and some small countries simply vanished forever. All communication was dead. 3 days later, in a cave deep within the forest, 2 tigers over 5 meters long were sleeping nearby. Beside a creature of 15 meters, I slowly woke from my slumber, opened my eyes, and shook the dust off. My height now exceeded 6 meters, and the black armor on my vital points had turned to gold. Under the sunlight, it flashed with a golden brilliance that matched my fire-red fur. If I looked like a fierce beast before, I now looked like a divine creature. Was this the power of spiritual energy awakening at the dawn of the end? Was this the true strength of heaven and earth? System, check my attributes. Weight, 25,000 tons. Strength, 2,500 points. Skills, Devour, Golden Armor, Crystal Fire. Just as I expected, my black armor had evolved. It was now a brilliant gold, and I had acquired a new skill, Crystal Fire. It was time to head out and take my new power for a test drive. As usual, I led the 2 tigers toward the coast. However, as we drew closer, the thunder of heavy artillery shook the air. The military base on the distant island was opening fire in a fit of desperation. But against an enemy this fierce, their efforts were useless. The casualties among the enemy creatures were practically zero. It was a pack of more than 10 giant lizards. Their leader reached an incredible length of 20 meters. Cold, golden armor covered its body, and the shells barely left a scratch on its hide. Inside the base, Captain Lud's face was grim. He radiated the powerful aura of the 9th level of the spirit origin realm. Thanks to the dawn of the new world, his subordinates included 5 warriors at the 8th level, and 2 at the 7th level of the bone strengthening realm. But against these giant lizards, their strength meant nothing. An officer rushed in to report, his voice trembling. Captain Lud, the tentacle lizards are less than 100 meters away. Our firepower is losing its effect. We can't stop them, so everyone get your weapons ready. Prepare yourselves for close-quarters combat. But against a 20-meter lizard, even a 6th-level bone-strengthening expert wouldn't stand a chance. The base only had one such expert, an ascetic monk from Tibet who had been meditating in seclusion since the world changed. Captain Lud knew that even if the monk emerged, he wouldn't have a prayer against that monster. All he could do now was fight to his last breath and hope to make those creatures bleed. When I reached the coast, no one in the base had spotted us yet. They were too busy rushing out to join the slaughter. Brothers, the captain roared. Taking down even one of them is a victory. Every lizard we kill means fewer deaths for our people. Soldiers charged toward the giants, clutching live grenades in their hands. They were ready to trade their lives for a single hit. But the explosions barely even scratched the lizard's scales. These monsters were on a different level. Even the smallest among them was over 10 meters long. To them, a human expert at the 6th level of the bone-strengthening realm wasn't even a threat worth noticing. They could crush one easily. Just as the base was about to fall, an iron disc came flying from the distance. It slammed into a 15-meter lizard, tearing a massive wound into its neck. The soldiers erupted in cheers. Master Gu is here. Then it happened. A monk in gray robes descended from the sky, radiating an aura that forced the lizards back. Captain Lud, his heart surging with hope, rushed toward the monk and asked, Master Gu, did you achieve the breakthrough? The monk nodded, but his eyes remained dark and somber. As he faced the beasts, I was watching from nearby, ready to step in, but I stopped. It was my first time seeing a human this powerful, leaping 30 feet with such ease. I was curious, just how strong was this Master Gu? At that moment, the 20-meter lead lizard locked its gaze directly onto him. From a strange angle, its colossal body lunged forward, straight at the master. The golden disc returned to Master Gu's hands and, as if coming to life, erupted in a golden flash. It sliced through the air, heading straight for the giant monster. It traveled at an impressive speed, but the beast dodged it with unusual agility. The lizard lunged its massive weight toward him. Master Gu retreated, leaping high into the air to avoid the impact. However, he had underestimated the creature's power. Its tail snapped like a whip, striking him midair. Master Gu was sent flying dozens of meters, falling hard against the ground. Captain Lud and a few soldiers rushed to help him, but the defensive line had already collapsed. Tragic despair was written across every man's face. Soldiers clutched their grenades, preparing for the end. In that critical moment, the sea next to the base began to boil. It churned with a sudden fury, and the lizards stared at the water with unease. Even the 20-meter leader began to back away. They had finally felt true fear. The survivors watched in confusion, unable to believe anything could make those beasts retreat like that. Master Gu woke up next to Luda, muttering in a weak, strained voice, to make the sea boil. If it's a sea beast, its power must be terrifying. Thanks for watching the video. My immense golden body emerged from the depths. The very second I appeared, the air temperature skyrocketed. My massive size made even that 20-meter leader look like a mere toy. The monsters that were so arrogant just moments ago were now scrambling backward, with pure killing intent burning in my eyes. And under the stunned gaze of the soldiers, I transformed into a golden bolt of lightning. I charged straight at the lead lizard. I struck like an unstoppable force of nature. The beast was completely shattered by my impact. Its skull was crushed into a bloody mess. It stumbled once and then collapsed. The others were terrified, but did they really think I'd let them escape? My body became a golden flash again, sending them flying before they could even run. A single graze from my crimson tusks was enough to decapitate one. The ground was soon littered with corpses. The base soldiers watched me, frozen in place. Panic gripped them as they realized those lizards had almost destroyed their home, and the colossal creature standing before them now was infinitely more lethal. Not far away, Luda realized the truth of the situation. He recognized me as the boar king of the forest. Before, my body had been covered in blood. I used to have black scales, but the world's awakening had transformed me completely. Luda approached cautiously and whispered, "Boar King, my lord, we thank you for saving us." I ignored him entirely. I simply raised my right paw, pointing at the lizard corpses and then toward the forest. Seeing this, Luda's eyes shone with joy, and he responded quickly. "Understood. I will order the men to bring them to your home. They would be delivered straight to my lair." I plunged into the sea and vanished before their eyes, leaving Luda whispering about sacred beasts protecting the land. I returned to my cave and fell into a deep, heavy sleep. When I woke up, I saw that Luda had kept his word. The lizard corpses were piled up outside like a small mountain. I could feel it. Devouring these would make my strength and size explode. Luda didn't know if I could understand him, but he had left something else behind. He left a file containing the military's classified data on ferocious beasts. This discovery filled me with a cold, predatory joy. The internet had some basic facts, but the government held the truly crucial intelligence. I began scanning the images and texts within the archive. Soldier-level beasts equal the 3 lower human ranks, while generals match the middle ranks. Lord-level beasts rival the 3 upper ranks, but there were no records yet of anything at king level. The report explained that monsters were strictly divided by species. These tentacled lizards were currently swarming every country on Earth. The giant snakes and bears I fought in the Unju forest were also listed as high-tier threats. But the section on Lord-level beasts was what truly caught my eye. It mentioned that 5 of these monsters had been discovered before the world's awakening. The largest was a 60-meter lizard king, while the other 4 hid deep within the Kunlun Mountains. To reach the Lord level, beasts didn't rely on the number of souls they possessed. They relied solely on their raw, brutal strength. The Lizard King could spit a blue flame of devastating power. According to the Waxia government's estimates, the oceans held countless beasts at that level. Lord-level monsters were lurking in the depths. But so far, only the Lizard King had revealed itself to the world. After scanning all the intel, I called my 2 subordinates over. Get over here, you two. You only have the strength of high-level soldiers right now. Do you realize that? As the Great Boar King, I need at least 2 generals under my command. Go, eat, and get stronger. As the feast began, Tiger 1 and Tiger 2 started to swell in size. Their intelligence was increasing along with their bodies as the 2 brothers roared. They obeyed instantly, tearing into the 9-meter lizard carcasses. I didn't hold back either. I began devouring the massive tentacles one by one. These giant lizards were undoubtedly general-level beasts. They immediately granted me 200 more strength points. System, check my attributes. Species, golden boar. Weight, 30,000 gene. Strength, 3,000. Size, 2,900. Skills, golden armor art. Crystal fire breath. I noticed that after hitting 15 meters in length, my growth had stalled. My current form was incredibly imposing, a far cry from those repulsive lizards. I wasn't obsessed with reaching a colossal size. 15 meters long and 6 meters high was plenty. System, how much further? I needed to know what was left for my next evolution. The requirements were steep, 100,000 gene in weight, with strength and size at 10,000 points. Only then could I evolve again. At this point, only Lord-level beasts could provide the push I needed. They were the only ones that would make me evolve quickly. But where could I find one? I turned on my phone and saw Waxia's social media was on fire. The internet was exploding with new footage. Videos of beasts hunting humans were everywhere. The official warning issued days ago had finally become a brutal reality. Everyone was hiding in their homes, too terrified to step outside. Meanwhile, countless monsters were swarming up from the river. They were tearing through everything to get inside the cities. Among the chaos, one specific report caught my eye. Breaking news. A 7-meter-tall lion had appeared. According to the Waxia government's assessment, this lion had already reached the early general level. Local residents were urged to take extreme caution. The army was already on the scene. The location didn't seem far from me at all. With the world's awakening, the city had been swallowed by a thick jungle. Beasts with overwhelming power were starting to roam the human streets freely. It looked like I'd have to take a trip to the city and cause a little chaos myself. I called out to Tiger 1 and Tiger 2. Walking through the jungle, we pushed toward the outskirts. I hadn't left Nanyu in a long time. I noticed the wild beasts out here were significantly more massive. General-level beasts, once rare outside the deep woods, were now everywhere. Maybe it was because I had slaughtered so many formidable creatures already. After the spiritual energy awakening, no Lord-level beast had emerged in the Dahlin forest. Or maybe I just hadn't run into one yet, since this forest felt truly infinite. Along the way, I encountered 5-meter-tall green wolves and 7-meter giant bears. But the energy I gained from these soldier-level beasts was becoming negligible. Time flew by, and after a few days of travel, I finally reached the edge of the forest. The thunderous roar of artillery fire echoed from the city. I looked up into the distance. A 7-meter lion was leaping onto a wall with incredible agility. It tore through the tanks, crushing them with every leap. Its claws flashed instantly, gleaming with a cold, immense power. And what was even worse, that beast, that giant lion, it moved with such terrifying agility. The tanks didn't stand a chance. They had no way to fight back. With a single swipe of its paw, another tank was reduced to a smoking wreck. Then, at the height of the life-or-death struggle, 3 dark figures armed with cold steel appeared. They struck from behind. Their aura was far from ordinary as they faced the general-level beast. They were 3 elite warriors, sent by the Warrior Association. 2 of them had already reached the peak. They were 6th-rank experts, masters of the Yaogan realm. And then there was the girl, a 7th-rank warrior. She had reached the Gangu realm, her delicate face masking a cold intensity. "Brother, this lion's intelligence is no joke," she said. "It won't be easy to kill." The warrior beside her gripped his long staff and identified the beast as the Lion King. It was the one that escaped the Kishi Zoo, likely surrounded by soldier-level minions. "When we make our move in a moment, we have to be extremely careful." The other 2 nodded solemnly at his words. Their faces were tight with tension, knowing the stakes. Being at the 6th rank of the Yaogan realm, meant they had already achieved a profound and spiritual connection with the divine energy of the Lord. They were in tune with the heavens and the earth. Their cold steel weapons allowed them to unleash their full, devastating power. Yet, facing a general-level beast, they didn't dare utter a word of arrogance. They couldn't afford to be distracted for even a single second. In the eyes of these humans, a general-level beast was a nightmare. I had sensed their arrival early on. I could feel the surge of their spiritual energy vibrating through the air. Their spiritual energy and defensive capabilities were impressive. To any normal creature, they would be truly terrifying. The beast roared and lunged, but the 6th-rank Yaogan warrior was ready. As the leader of the group, he didn't hesitate for a second. He gripped the hilt of his blade with both hands. Then, he threw himself into the front lines. With a burst of speed, he closed the gap. He cleared over 10 meters in a single, desperate leap. He cut through the air with lethal precision. His entire body transformed into a silver flash of light. He aimed his strike directly at the massive beast's throat. But things didn't go according to his plan. The creature was incredibly agile for its size. It reared up high on its hind legs. It swung its massive claws without a shred of fear. It intended to catch the warrior midair and crush him. The air turned a violent shade of red. A resonant, metallic clang echoed through the clearing. It sounded as if the warrior's sharp sword had struck a solid wall of reinforced steel. That warrior from the 6th rank, the elite Yaogan fighter, he was sent flying backward. The sheer force of the impact was brutal. Seeing their leader fall, the other two launched their attack. They didn't hesitate for a second. I watched as they closed in, the staff and the sword in their hands. They struck the lion with everything they had, but it dodged gracefully and swatted them both away. Blood began to trickle from the corner of the girl's mouth. Against a general-level beast, she wouldn't have lasted a single hit without her teammates. While they were distracted by the carnage, I had already slipped into the city with my 2 little tigers. My 2 cubs were already tearing through dozens of lions. The beast stood 4 meters tall. Some were even 5 meters long, but my tigers didn't care. Hu Ji and Hu Er dominated the field, massacring the entire pride in the blink of an eye. The pack finally realized the tide had turned against them. When they tried to flee, I was already there, blocking their only path out. How could I ever let them escape? The street was soon littered with the corpses of over 10 lions. Hu Ji and Hu Er continued their total massacre while I reluctantly accepted the kills they offered me. I sighed, realizing that raising an army for 1,000 days just for this one moment was truly worth it. Right there in the middle of the street, before everyone's eyes, my 2 tigers engaged in a fierce melee. They went hand-to-hand against the Lion King. It was a brutal, beastly struggle. Watching the situation, I realized the siblings and the Lion King wouldn't settle this anytime soon. I growled, "Fall back, leave him to me." I commanded Hu Ji not to stray too far. Hu Er obeyed my order and began to retreat, pulling away from the battlefield with visible reluctance. In that instant, the Lion King showed clear signs of tension. He could feel the immense power radiating from my heart. He stared at the creature before him and braced himself, but I remained completely relaxed. I began advancing toward him slowly. I thought, "Thanks for the meal." Suddenly, I accelerated, and the very air seemed to explode around me. The ground seemed to tremble beneath me. A massive shockwave slammed directly into the Lion King. He didn't even have time to defend himself before his body was launched. He flew more than 10 meters into the air. Then, he crashed violently back into the ground. Everyone watching was frozen in shock. But inside the tank, the middle-aged commander frowned as if he were calculating something. A second later, he threw open the hatch. The commander stepped out with a firm, steady gaze. I wasn't in any rush to devour the Lion King now that he was defeated. I already had the strength to hunt general-level demonic beasts easily. What I really needed to evolve further was a lord-level beast, and for that, I needed the government's cooperation. I looked toward the Huaxia soldiers. My golden tusks flashed in the light. The lion's massive head fell right at the feet of the commander, Wabao, who had just exited the tank. His eyes showed a flicker of fear mixed with a hint of joy. I was certain he understood my intention. The Lion King wouldn't boost my strength much, but he was the perfect bargaining chip. I needed to negotiate with Huaxia. One after another, the soldiers began climbing out of their tanks to stare at the severed head. They looked at the trophy at their commander's feet, feeling the weight of a life lost. Deep disbelief filled the air before Commander Guabao suddenly snapped to attention and saluted me. The soldiers behind him followed suit, saluting in perfect unison. By killing the Lion King, I had saved the civilians, and their gratitude was genuine. Standing before these people, I moved slowly. I gave them a single, slow nod. That small gesture immediately ignited a spark in the hearts of everyone there, including the 3 warriors. They watched me in shock and whispered, "This truly is a sacred beast." Hui and Huer, walking by my side, felt a surge of pride. They could sense my intentions clearly, so they showed no hostility toward the humans. Then, I pointed toward the map on Guabao's back. His face turned solemn, but he eventually handed the map over to me. It clearly marked the current military situation and the pressure points in every region of Huaxia. It was a high-level military secret, and it was exactly what I needed. With the map secured, I finally departed, dragging the Lion King's corpse behind me. Every warrior and soldier watched me as I walked away. I kept moving until I vanished from their sight, focusing on the map's data. I scanned the files, but I couldn't help it. A deep sense of dread began to wash over me. The pressure Huaxiao faced now was absolutely colossal, with billions of beasts lurking in the sea. They were waiting for their chance to strike the coast. Before, there were only creatures like the tentacled lizard, but now, many more had emerged. Countless new species were appearing, and the sea beasts were becoming fundamentally different. Many had reached colossal sizes, fueled by the energy at the center of the earth. They were still evolving, and they were doing it at a frantic, terrifying pace. I checked my phone and noticed the internet had gone eerily quiet. The world was finally feeling the true terror of the spiritual energy awakening. People were organizing to trade supplies, and one message stood out to the survivors. The launching base had been established as a voluntary refuge before the army arrived. Reports showed 5,300 soldier-level beasts and 50 general-level beasts in the area. The army no longer had enough firepower to suppress them all. Seeing this news made me shudder. 5,000 soldier-level beasts in a single city was a nightmare. It was pure carnage, considering most ordinary people had no way to defend themselves. That many beasts would overwhelm them, and the worst part was the horrors still hidden in the forests. General-level and even lord-level beasts were still emerging everywhere. I walked through the market lost in thought, effortlessly crushing a few soldier-level beasts along the way. My plan was simple: reach the southern coast and complete my next evolution there. I turned to the two tigers behind me and gave a cold order. If you see a beast hurting a human, kill it. Hu Ji and Hu Er responded with low, obedient roars. We left the market behind and pushed forward. After traveling hundreds of kilometers, we reached the next city. This was Jinping, a town located within the jurisdiction of Xi Jinping City. It was slightly smaller than the last place, once prosperous, but now the streets were hollow. Every so often, blood-curdling screams echoed from the residential blocks. I knew from the internet that things were bad, but Jinping was a tragedy beyond words. The entire city's power grid had collapsed, leaving them in total darkness. They were completely cut off from the world, and the number of beasts inside was staggering. There was likely an extremely powerful general-level beast leading the slaughter. The situation was so dire that even the army couldn't intervene. Jinping had been abandoned to its fate, so I kept moving. I walked the desolate streets with my two subordinates at my side. We soon ran into more soldier-level beasts, but Hu Ji and Hu Er tore them apart instantly. My two tigers were currently at the peak of the soldier rank. They were just one step away from becoming generals themselves. Just as they were about to reach that breakthrough, I stopped dead in my tracks. My sharp sense of smell picked up an incredibly powerful aura. There was no doubt about it. A general-level beast was waiting up ahead. It looked like we were approaching the Jinping University campus. Less than 1,000 meters away, a massive crowd of survivors was huddled together. They were trembling, cornered inside the dilapidated gymnasium. Standing before them was a beast with a colossal, towering body. It was a monster of massive proportions. This creature was leading dozens of other monsters in the assault. They were slamming fiercely against the gymnasium doors. The students inside couldn't help but scream in pure terror. There was a specific reason why Jinping University had become such a death trap. The campus had been home to a massive population of stray cats and dogs. Most of them had been fed and cared for by the students for years. But with the world's awakening, their sanctuary had turned into a slaughterhouse. The sheer number of beasts here defied belief. It far surpassed the density of monsters found anywhere else in the city. And that was the problem. When that general-level beast finally appeared, it claimed this territory as its own personal hunting ground. The entire student community was being backed into a corner. The monsters attacked the gymnasium doors with a savage frenzy. I couldn't tell who it was, but someone let out a piercing scream. The sound was absolutely deafening. Students were running in every direction. Not a single soul dared to stand and face those beasts. Even the 8th grade Ironskin warriors were terrified. In fact, they were running even faster than the others. The fastest one among them all was an 8th grade student named Yang Quan. He was an Ironskin rank fighter. When the massive wild dog beast smashed through the metal door, he jumped immediately. He dove through a window to escape, but the moment Yang Quan cleared the gym, he witnessed a sight that was truly spine-chilling. A creature with red fur and divine golden armor appeared. I was 15 meters long, followed by two 5-meter Siberian tigers, strolling calmly through the Jinping University campus. Compared to the monsters at the gym, we were far more terrifying, but Yang Quan was shocked by something else. These extraordinary beasts didn't immediately tear him to pieces, they just stared him down. They gave him a cold look and kept moving straight toward the gymnasium. On the way there, Hu Ji, Hu Er, and I had slaughtered over 10 high-level beasts. Every single one of them was at the beast soldier rank, but they weren't what I was after. I had a much bigger target in mind. Thanks for watching the video. I finally reached the entrance of the gymnasium, and there it was, standing right in front of the gym. A giant beast slowly turned its head, its entire body covered in sharp quills. Each spike was 3 to 4 meters long, a hedgehog transformed by spiritual energy. Hu Ji and Hu Er stared at the massive creature and let out a threatening roar. They didn't dare to charge in blindly, as general-level beasts are a different breed. The general-level hedgehog didn't dare to attack me lightly either, immediately bristling its quills. Even I felt a strange hesitation, looking at it and wondering where to even start. I was confident its spikes wouldn't pierce my golden armor, but I had no desire to test that theory. However, it was the perfect time to test my glazed fruit breath skill. I finally had a massive meat shield to use as a practice target. Inside the gym, many students had already fallen under the claws of the beast soldiers. A few surviving teachers and students were hiding in a narrow office, barely breathing. Among them were a few student cultivators who had managed to reach the entry realm. Those who could escape had already jumped out of the windows. I gave a signal to the brothers, Hu Ji and Hu Er. I ordered them to charge into the gymnasium. They needed to clear out every insignificant creature left inside. As high-level tiger-type beast soldiers, they had more than enough power to crush those evolved stray dogs and cats. The remaining beasts and the few surviving students stood frozen. They were paralyzed in place, not daring to make a single sound. They watched in pure terror as Hu Ji and Hu Er began the slaughter. Outside the gym, it was just me and the general-level hedgehog. I opened my maw, and massive currents of air began to swirl across the entire Jinping University campus. These currents were formed from the pure accumulation of spiritual energy. The energy began to flow incessantly toward my lips. Then, a red flame started to radiate a blinding light. It was a dazzling crimson glow that appeared in an instant. The heat immediately evaporated the moisture from the surrounding trees. The hedgehog finally realized the danger, and its face twisted in pure terror. General-level beasts are usually stronger than humans for one simple reason. It's mostly due to their colossal size and their highly evolved bodies. Very few of them can actually manipulate spiritual energy like this. My glazed fruit breath had already surpassed those limits, reaching a completely different plane of power. Faced with that rapidly rising heat, the hedgehog abandoned everything else. It didn't care about its pride anymore and turned its back to flee. But the red flame erupted in the blink of an eye. It was a blinding flash that tore through the air like a jet taking off. The 10-meter-long general-level beast had its head pierced through like scrap iron. The light faded, and its massive body collapsed heavily, kicking up a giant cloud of dust. I walked toward the hedgehog's corpse as the surviving students and teachers watched me. They stared in terror at the scene before their eyes until a sudden roar filled the sky. 2 military helicopters were circling over the Jinping University campus. As I looked up at the 2 choppers, a cold glint flashed in my eyes. However, they only made one pass over the gymnasium before flying off in another direction. The teachers and students left in the enclosure couldn't hold back anymore. They started screaming at the sky. What's wrong with those helicopters? Why won't they just annihilate this monster right now? Exactly, this beast is colossal. Did they seriously not see it? Inside the minds of these people, a deep, bitter doubt began to bloom. Just then, a military jeep came roaring through the traffic toward us. The vehicle tore onto the Jinping University grounds. The people inside gripped long spears and swords, their auras boiling with power. With just one look, I could tell they were all Rupin-level warriors. The sight of that jeep reignited a desperate spark of hope. Within the survivors huddled inside the gymnasium. Several teachers peered through the windows, whispering among themselves. To face a monster this massive, they must have sent in the real experts. Look at those weapons. They're forged from special materials just to kill beasts. As they muttered, several young men in black shirts and leather pants jumped out. They came to a halt not far from me, their blades flashing ice-cold in the sun. The teacher, Akira, was right about one thing. Those weapons looked exceptionally sharp. These men were, without a doubt, warriors of the Zhong Sanjing realm.